Hello grade 9s and welcome to your final exam breakdown and study tips video. This video is going to walk you through basically what to expect from your exam, which is from the province, and not really go over the material per se, but just the types of questions you're going to see. So let's get started. There are two parts to your final exam. Part A, which is a no calculator portion, and a part B where there is a calculator allowed. This year, your no calculator portion will be on June 12th, I believe, and I forget the date exactly, but I think it's around June 27th for your math part B. Hopefully those are the right dates. So I will talk about the part A first, and then we'll go into the part B stuff because that'll be after. So your part A is a no calculator 20 question test. This is a numerical response test, which we've been practicing all year, and you will get 30 minutes for this test. The topics will be as followed. But it is important to know that all questions are based on numeracy. Now what this means is there's no word problems. They set up the problem for you. You just have to be able to solve it. However, you will not have a calculator to do so. So they are very simplistic questions. This was the breakdown from last year's exam. So rational numbers were about half of the questions, or 10 questions. Then we have these three other categories: powers, squares and roots, and equations, which constitute the other half. Obviously, rational numbers is a big portion of this. So rational numbers would include things like fractions, decimals, and the operations in between them. Powers, that would be your power rules, the square roots, and squares would be estimating square roots and finding things on a number line. And finally, solving equations is a small portion, only 3 questions last year, but can combine all of those things before it. So again, your time available for this test will be 30 minutes. You get an extra 30 minutes if you need, so a maximum of an hour for this portion. But it is timed out to be 30 minutes. It should be all you need for this test. So I've copied a few questions from the previous year's Part A. And just to give you an idea of what kind of questions you're going to be seeing. So this first question here: what is the value of -3 minus a -4 plus a -10? Obviously, these are integers, and they're testing your ability to add or subtract them without the use of a calculator. A lot of people get these questions wrong because of the negative signs involved. Okay, it makes it a little confusing. Usually I recommend people drawing chips if they can't figure this out. So for example, I would draw a -3 chips. And from this picture, I need to subtract 4 negative chips. Well, I don't see 4 negative chips, so I would add to this picture a negative chip and its positive chip, which would be a 0 pair. I still, in this picture, have -3. -1, 2, 3, and 0 makes -3. But now I can take away the -4 chips that we're trying to take away here. So I would take them away, and I'm left with my answer. So I'm at a +1 chip. Then, to this +1 chip, I need to add 10 negatives. So I would add 10 negative chips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And because I'm adding, I just have to add them to the picture. But then any signs that are opposite, you can cancel, and you'd be left with your answer, which in this case is -9. Now, obviously, there are easier ways to do this if you're good at your mental math, which is kind of what it's testing. But even with drawing that and an explanation, I probably only spent 1 minute doing this question. Okay, here's another example. What is the value of 2 cubed plus 2 to the 0? This is, of course, your power laws kind of question. You need to know how these exponents work and how you can combine them. Now, in this question, we're adding, but they could be doing this. They could be doing this. You just have to remember your rules to combining exponents. Now, in this particular question, adding has no rule. So the way to solve this one would be to evaluate both exponents and then add the results. So 2 cubed is the same as 2 times 2 times 2, not 6. A lot of people will write 6 here. And 2 to the 0 is a property you need to remember. There's no way to actually calculate this without just knowing the property. Any 0 exponent makes the evaluation of that term 1. So this is how I would write that out. This turns into 8 plus 1, which is 9. Okay. And here is another type of example that you might get for the roots. So what is the value of root 5 over 20 expressed as a fraction in simplest form? The square root here, a lot of people want to grab a calculator to evaluate what the square root of 5 is. But you don't actually have to. And this is where your simplification comes into play. If you don't know what the square root of 5 is, there has to be a better way to do this question. So my first step would be to write them separately, with the square root on top and the square root on the bottom. And then I would factor the bottom here. So this would turn into the square root of 5 on top, and 20 has a factor of 5. And hopefully you recognize that. 20 has many different factors, but we want to use the factor of 5 and 4. So I could write this as 5 times 4. Then I could separate that square root, as we've done in class, and you should be able to write it like that, with separate square roots. Now the purpose of doing this is to simplify without actually having to calculate. And anything you see on top of the fraction with anything you see on the bottom of the fraction that's the same can cancel or divide into 1. So root 5 divided by root 5 is just 1. So my answer so far is 1 over the root 4, which was left on the bottom. But we all know the square root of 4, it's 2. And then this is my answer, 1/2. Or 0.5 if it's in a numerical response. I think with this question they actually asked you to write the top and the bottom separately in the numerical response. But it's important that we get to there by simplification, not actually calculating things. Okay. So that was a brief overview for part A. So a couple things that you should keep in mind when studying for your part A. One is know your times tables. And I know I've been beating this like a drum all year, but it is important. It does help things speed up for you. If you don't know your times tables, you're going to be taking a lot of extra time doing simple math that hopefully you don't have to do. Number 2 here, be efficient with fraction operations, which means having a mixed fraction and other types of fractions, being able to quickly go through that question will help you. Decimals, this is usually dealing with dividing and multiplying these decimals. People can spend a lot of time doing that. Try and be very quick with those things. Number 4, practice integer operations. Like the first question that we did in this video. The faster you are with integers, the faster your test will be. Okay. Then we deal with the power rules. These are things you have to memorize. There's no helping you other than that. And for a lot of questions, you need to know the power rule to do the question. For example, 4 to the 10 divided by 4 to the 9. You would not want to calculate what 4 to the 10 is. Even with a calculator, that's a huge number, and same with 4 to the 9. But if you know your power rules, the answer comes very quick and easy. Okay, number 6 here, know the perfect squares up to 15. I usually have no need for any perfect squares beyond that. So if you can memorize those ones, I mean numbers like 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, all the way up to 225. Okay? These are your perfect squares. It's nice if you recognize them. Okay? And last, but not least, know how to understand how to estimate square roots. So if they give you a square root, for example, square root of 90, this is not a perfect square root, but they might give you a number line and ask you to locate on that number line, where does that square root fall? And you're going to have to be able to pinpoint that. So estimating that this is between 8 is between 9 and 10, approximately halfway, you should be able to take a quick guess and figure out where on that number line it would be. Okay. These, of course, come from the perfect squares of 81 and 100, where 90 is between them. But again, we've gone over that already. So just remember how to guess where a square root would fall. And even a rational square root, like the one we did in the previous question. Sorry. Okay, so that is the part A. On to the part B. Part B is typically the hardest part of the test. There are 40 questions, so there's a lot more questions. They are calculator based, and here are the topics from the year before with their approximate number of questions. So number questions, so these are like your rational numbers, fractions, those sorts of things. We only had 25% of the test. Patterns and relations, this is creating equations, this is graphing. This was the majority of the test at 45. We also have some shape and space, so this would be things like scale diagrams, surface area, circles. This is another kind of large chunk. And the smallest chunk is your probability and statistics. And again, probability comes from grade 7, where our statistics, which we covered in grade 9. So it kind of covers the 3 years. So be forewarned. So the patterns and relations are really the largest chunk of what you're going to get. And most of that requires a calculator, but also requires a lot more thinking. Now, compared to the part A, where all the questions are low complexity, you will get low, medium, and high complexity. High complexity question would be like finding the volume of a cylinder and then applying your answer to finding a dimension compared to the surface area. So you're combining more than one concept in a high complexity question. Majority questions are word-based, which I would actually consider 100% of the questions are word-based. 25% are number-based, but even those can be inside of a word problem. So word problems are a huge issue for us, and we need to be able to understand that that's what we're going to be seeing on every single question. Yeah, I said that. So here is an example. This thing's kind of in the way. Here's an example of last year's, or one of the previous year's word-based problems. So the diameter of a cylindrical water slide is 1.5 meters. Okay. The water running along the bottom of the slide measures 1 meter across, shown in the picture. Okay. So this distance is the 1 meter, if you can't see that. Okay. To the nearest hundredth of a meter, what is the depth of the water x at its deepest point? And here is x, if you can't see that. So in this question, they give you a lot of information. They give you the word problem up here. They give you a picture to go along with it, but even in the picture, they don't tell you everything. So for example, this 1.5 meters, they did not draw on this picture. It would be up to you to figure out that the diameter, which I'll draw vertically, and hopefully you would too. There's your center. That diameter is 1.5. Then to solve this question, like we've done in the past, you create your triangle with a 90 degree, because this is a bisector, and you solve that triangle. Okay, so this distance will be half a meter. This distance would be 0.75 meters, half of the diameter, because it's a radius. And you're solving for, I'll write it in red here, this distance here. Okay, I'm not going to get too much into the math here. I'm not going to solve this question. Again, we're looking for that one, but that's how you would plan this out. But a lot of math just with the picture, even before you start calculating. So these are the kinds of complexities that you're going to see. Here's another one. This question, there is no picture. So a square design is painted on a wall that has a length of 24 meters and a height of 18 meters. The design covers 75% of the area of the wall, and they want to know what is the perimeter of the design. So in this question, they could have given you a picture, but they chose not to. So my instinct would be to draw a picture first and then solve this question. So the wall has a length of 24 and a height of 18. So here's your wall. Length of 24, height of 18. A square design. So a square design is painted on the wall. So each of these are the same length. And the area of this little square is 75% the area of the entire wall. Okay, and without getting too much into the math here, I would find the area of the wall, and I would minus I would take that area and I would multiply it by the 75%. This gives you the area of the design. So this would be the area of the design. And then from that area, I would take the square root, and I would get my answer. Okay, again, we're not really discussing why that's the right answer. I just want to show you the types of questions. So in this case, if they don't give you a picture, learn to draw. Okay, so it's really just a brief rundown. So for my final tips for part B, know how to use your calculator. Step one, a lot of people forget how to square something or cube something or square root something or where the negative sign is. Please know your calculator. Okay. Also, bring a calculator. Before grabbing your calculator, set up the problem algebraically if possible. So, for number 2 here, I mean draw your pictures, do the math on paper first. Your calculator should really be the last step of your question. Also, watch out for what the question is asking and work backwards from that. A lot of options on a part B are answers to parts of your problem, but not the final. So a lot of people will do some math and see their answer as one of the options and say that's the answer, even though they needed to go one step further. Okay. Also, a lot of people don't do this, but it really works with multiple choice tests. Use the answers to help you. You have 4 possible answers. If you're really stuck, eliminate some, and that might help you. Okay, work backwards from those answers sometimes. And then finally, practice weeks before the test, not days, not a day. Some people just practice the night before because you have so many exams to study from. I'm giving this video to you now to remind you to start now. Okay, if you have questions about what to practice, please let me know. And other than that, I wish you the best of luck on these exams, and hopefully you come out better than where you came in from. All right, so see you guys later.